and welcome to our virtual tour to Yerushalayim during the time of the eve of Sukkot. My name is Ami, tour guide living in Jerusalem, and thank you to Beit Avichai for hosting me on the tour. Let's go. And as we are starting to go, let's take a look at a map of Israel and see the areas we're going to be visiting today. You can follow the red marker. We are mostly going to be traveling to Jerusalem. And on the roads to Jerusalem and in Jerusalem itself, we're going to be talking about the different activities that took place with the pilgrims, or the Olei Regel, as they're called in Hebrew. We're going to do a bit of an introduction, and we'll talk a bit about what goes on today just to get into things. And then we'll talk a little bit of the pre-Jerusalem era regarding Olei Regel, the pilgrims. We'll start with Shiloh, the Mishkan, the Tabernacle. Then we'll talk about the temples in Tel Dan and in Beit El, but most of the time we'll be on our way to Yerushalayim and in Yerushalayim. So without further ado, let's get started. Well, let's get started with today, with planes, trains, and automobiles. When traveling to Yerushalayim during Sukkot, during Pesach, during Shavuot, today, it's really a wonderful, wonderful feeling of togetherness with people from all walks of life and all different backgrounds. And you start by feeling it at the beginning on the roads, on the highways, as we're making our way in the traffic. And the mass is coming to the old city of Yerushalayim and to the Kotel. And on a personal note, to be honest with you, if in the past I got annoyed with all the traffic and the masses coming into Yerushalayim and to the old city during the holidays, the Chagim and the Three Regalim, since COVID, I will always appreciate the half full cup of seeing the masses coming from now on for the rest of my life. And you can come by train if you're traveling from abroad. And when you're in Israel, you can come by plane if you're traveling from abroad. And you can come in Israel by train and by bus and by vehicle all the way into Yerushalayim. And we'll talk about the picture that's on the top over here a little bit later into the tour about what happens in Yerushalayim today and at the Kotel today. But we promised you a tour of Olei Regel and coming to Jerusalem during the time of the temple 2,000 years ago. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself in the 21st century, so let's go back to then. Okay, and if we're traveling back then 2,000 years ago during Second Temple era, be it via camel, be it via, more realistically, probably by donkey, Philo from Alexandria, first century Jewish philosopher, is going to describe the feeling of people arriving to here, the Olei Regel, the pilgrims coming to Jerusalem and coming to the temple. And what's he going to say? He's going to write thousands of people from thousands of towns, some via land and others via the sea, from east, west, north and south, came on Chag to the temple like a safe haven, a safe port protecting from life's storms. But before we get to the times of the temple, and we're going to be focusing mostly on the end of Second Temple era 2,000 years ago, let's go back a little bit earlier, to a little bit over 3,000 years ago, before the temple, before Jerusalem. We have the Mishkan, the Tabernacle in Shiloh. In the book of Shmuel, Samuel is going to describe the Olei Regel, the pilgrim by the name of Elkanah, who every year is going to make his way to Shiloh, in the hills of Shomron of Samaria, the tribe of Ephraim. And he goes from town to town and village to village, and along the way he's going to meet people, and he's going to say to them, are you coming to the Mishkan? Are you coming to the Tabernacle? And more often than not, I can imagine people saying, well, maybe next year. We're harvesting our fields now. We're busy with this. We're busy with that. Next year will come. And we can open up the book of Shmuel itself and see a description of Elkanah making his way to Shiloh, to the Tabernacle. And it says, there was a man from Ramatayim of the Tzufits in the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah. He had two wives, one named Hannah and the other Pnina. This man used to go from his town every year to worship and to offer sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh. So join me with Elkanah and Hannah and the pilgrims Olei Regel that did come to the Tabernacle in Shiloh with a short video overlooking the area of the Mishkan. Just 1 second, back to regular, there we go. Welcome to Ami Israel Guide. We're now standing inside ancient Shiloh, overlooking the Mishkan, the Tabernacle. And we're walking over here with the flow of the pilgrims that are coming to here in biblical times. Where are we going to meet? In the moment when we head inside, we're going to meet Eli, the Kohen, the high priest. We're going to meet Shmuel, Samuel, the prophet. We're also going to meet Eli's problematic sons, Chofni and Pinchas. Not so sure that we want to deal with them. We can smell the smell of the Ktoret, of the incense, of the Korbanot, of the sacrifices from over here. So what are you waiting for? Follow me into the Mishkan. And we'll enter the Mishkan, and when we enter the Mishkan, we can see And this is not a tour of Shiloh, but I'll just keep this very, very brief. We can see the walls that are running east-west. They're running north-south, 25 and 50 meters, an impressive place for the Mishkan, for the Tabernacle over 3,000 years ago. And the cool thing is if we go to Shiloh today, and after walking through the antiquities, want to get more of a feel of what it's like to be in the Mishkan in ancient times. All we need to do is to drive into the town of Shiloh itself today and see the synagogue, the modern-day synagogue today, which is built like the Mishkan. Maybe we can go to there on Sukkot, all right, which is starting tomorrow night, or Pesach, or Shavuot, to get a bit of a feel of what it was like to be in the Mishkan, in the Tabernacle, over 3,000 years ago. Because the shape from, from the outside is the shape of the Mishkan. But if you walk through the doors at the entrance that are in front of us over here, what are we going to see? I find it really cool. The inside has different, the areas that we use inside the synagogue are built like different vessels that were in the Mishkan. Be it right in the middle of the synagogue over here, we can see the area of the bima, the altar, which is built like the sacrificial altar, with the horns 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if we step up onto the bima over here, in order to be a cantor, a chazan, or read from the Torah or whatnot, what are we going to see? We're going to see this right over here. This is where you read the Torah from. And this is supposed to be the showbread table. And we can see the loaves of bread that were put into these shelves over here. They don't really leave bread in there today, don't worry. But that's the idea, okay? To sort of reenact what the Mishkan was like. And we have the golden menorah, of course, which is right over here on the parochet, which is covering the ark. But let's leave the Mishkan, okay? And let's go to the era where the tribes are going to be split, okay? The land of Israel is split up into 12 tribes, as the books of Kings will talk to us about. And what's going to happen is after the Mishkan and Shiloh, King David will come along. He's going to come to Jerusalem, which is right over here, and he will make it the capital of the Jewish people for the first time 3,000 years ago. His son Shlomo Solomon is going to build the first temple, okay, an attempt to unite the different tribes, but it doesn't really work out. When a generation later, after the time of Solomon, there is a split between the different tribes, and we end up now with two kingdoms. We end up with the northern kingdom over here, and we end up with the kingdom of Judah, which is right over here. Now here's the thing. Of course, in Judah, the capital is going to be Jerusalem, with the temple over there, the Olei Regel. The pilgrims will make their way always to Jerusalem, but where are they going to go in the northern kingdom? Well, this is a problem that their king Yerovam ben Nevat, 2,900 years ago, he needs to deal with it. So first of all, where were the temples that he does create? So he's going to create temples or altars over here in the north in Dan, and he's going to also create over here in Beitel, between the tribe of Benjamin and Ephraim. And when he does this, and we can see pictures of these two sites over here, Tel Dan and Beitel, he's a little worried. He's a little worried because at the beginning, right before he builds the altars and these sites over here, he says, wait a minute, it'll be Sukkot, it'll be Pesach, it'll be the Feast of Tabernacles, it'll be Passover. I'm going to lose my power because where are the people going to go? They're going to go as pilgrims, Olei Regel, to Jerusalem. And that is going to, basically what he's saying is my northern kingdom will fall apart because everyone's going to go on these important days to the important place in Jerusalem. He says, let's create new altars with golden calves, which will be in Tel Dan and Beitel. And the book of Kings is going to tell us a story. And it says like this: if these people still go up to offer sacrifices at the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, the first temple, the heart of these people will turn back from me, back to the kingdom of Judah. So the king took counsel and made two golden calves. He set up one in Beitel and placed the other in Dan. And we can see a bronze calf over here dating back to about 3,000 years ago, found in Samaria, of this ancient god over here. But we were talking about that most of this virtual tour today is going to be in a Second Temple era, 2,000 years ago. The way to Jerusalem, the road to Jerusalem, or as the tour is called, the journey to Jerusalem, and in Jerusalem itself. So let's jump forward now. And we're going to leave the First Temple era. The Second Temple is going to be built 2,500 years ago. And now we're talking about 2,000 years ago at the end of Second Temple era. First century before the Common Era, first century of the Common Era. Guys, Pesach, Passover is around the corner. No, not really. Don't go running, start cleaning your house and buying matzah. Don't worry about it. In reality, of course, Sukkot is around the corner. But in this particular quote over here from Masechet Shkalim, in the Mishnah, it's talking about the preparations for Passover, for Pesach, and it says like this: On the first of Adar, Adar is the Hebrew month that usually comes out around March. On the first of Adar, they make a public announcement about the shekels. What does that mean? Basically, it's a tax. We need to make sure that when the masses are making their way to Jerusalem, we need to make sure that the roads to Jerusalem are appropriate. They're prepared. All right, they're fixed up. Right? It was a tough winter. We need to make sure that however the winter affected these roads, it needs to be fixed up. And of course, in Jerusalem itself, we need to prepare the city for all of the masses. By the way, in a minute, we'll talk about how many these masses are, but we're going to get to that. The city needs to be ready. So there's taxes that are collected from Jews around the world in order to fix up the roads. On the 15th, okay, we started with the first of Adar. Now we're 2 weeks later in the middle of Adar. May I remind you that Pesach is the following month in Nisan, April. On the 15th, they fix the roads and the streets and the ritual water baths, and they perform all public duties, and they mark the graves. So let's talk about this for a minute. First of all, a road. So on the left side of the screen, we can see a road over here. We can see these steps that date back to 2,000 years ago. Where is this located? When you're coming up to Jerusalem, not on the main number 1 highway. When you're coming up on a road, it's called the 375 highway. You're coming up from the Elah Valley towards Gush Etzion, a little bit south of Jerusalem. This is one of the various main roads that people walked on in order to arrive in Jerusalem. And it's right next to the main road of today. Here's the asphalt. Okay, all you need to know is to stop on the side of the road and to walk on these ancient steps 2,000 years ago. By the way, it's one of those aha moments in Israel when you're traveling around and you have a modern-day road, and next to it, well, just a random 2,000-year-old main road that our great-grandparents walked on their way to Jerusalem. So this over here. You need to fix it up because it's affected by the rains in the winter. That's one thing. On the bottom picture over here, we can see, thanks to Google Earth, an overview of what's known today as the 443 highway, known as the Beit Choron Ascent. This is a famous and well-used road making the way from east, from what is today known as the Tel Aviv metropolitan area. The coast, making their way from west to east up to Jerusalem. And along the way over here too, we can see remains on the side of the highway. You need to know where to look. Remains from the Beit Choron ascent, this road, main road leading up to Jerusalem. And as they're making their way along the road, they're going to visit, what does it say in the bottom line here? And they mark the graves. Mark the graves is, along the way, a lot of times you'll have someone that will pass away. And whoever passes away, along the way, they'll bury them on the side. Now, Tum'ain Tahara, purity and impurity, was a very central part of life, and we're going to meet it a few more times on this virtual tour. A very central part of life on a daily basis in many ways during Second Temple and the Second Temple era 2,000 years ago. So you want to make sure that you're not going to walk on or next to someone's graves by accident. So they mark the graves. They put what we call in slang in Hebrew, hujum. They put a pile of rocks on the graves so that people make sure to know not to walk next to the grave, to be careful from that. And if we're already talking about issues of tumain tara, purity and impurity, we can see this mikveh, this ritual bath, on the top right corner over here. There were special mikvaot, special ritual baths, which were created on the route for the olei regel, for the pilgrims making their way to Jerusalem. How do we know that they were created specifically for the pilgrims, the olei regel, and not for your closest town in the area? There are various ways to identify these particular ritual baths, these particular mikvaot, but one of them is simply because there's nothing built around it. They're randomly on a main road, not next to another town, and that is the story with this mikveh over here, which is on Derech HaAvot, on the way of the patriarchs, which is in Gush Etzion, south of Jerusalem, between Alon Shvut and Neve Daniel. There's a nice dirt path you can walk on and also drive to see this mikveh today. Food for thought and a question mark that we'll address later on in the tour. When looking at this mikveh, this is one mikveh, okay, with two entrances, an entrance on the right, an entrance or an exit on the left, with a barrier, a mechitza, in the middle. Why is it like that? Hold that thought. We'll talk about that later on our tour today. And yalla, let's go. Before we make our way, for talking a little bit about the shkalim that we're given, I said it'd be a wonderful opportunity just to show off the beautiful shkalim that were created between the years 66 to 70 of the Common Era. Minted Hebrew coins when the Jews were rebelling against the Romans, and on one side on the left it says chetzi hashekel, half a shekel, and on the other side on the right it says Yerushalayim HaKdusha, Holy Jerusalem. These were coins that were created a few years before the Second Temple was destroyed and not necessarily used in earlier years before. But always fun to see coins. And yalla, let's make our way to Jerusalem. It's going to be a bit of a walk, and it's a little warm. I don't know if they heard of global warming 2,000 years ago, but I'm sure it was still sometimes a little warm when they walked. So I'm going to take a drink. And now we can go. I must say, even after a year and a half of guiding virtually many, many tours at this point, it is still very weird to be sitting in front of a camera and knowing that a couple hundred people approximately are watching me, and all I see is my screen and a video camera. But it said that we are traveling together, and the country was split up into 24 areas at the time. So just choose a spot in Israel where you want to start traveling from, and we're going to wake up in the morning, all right, and we're going to go to the Ir HaMa'amad. The Ir HaMa'amad means the capital town of our area. And we get to over there, we meet everybody from our area. And it says like this in Masechet Bikurim, the Mishnah, Tractate Bikurim, it says, all the inhabitants of the cities of the Ma'amad, of the area, would assemble in the city of the Ma'amad, the main city, the main town, and they would spend the night in the open streets, and they would not enter any of the houses. Let's stop here for a minute. Why? Why not sleep in your local hotel? Look, remember we were talking before about Tumah and Tara, how purity and impurity affected so much of the daily life of Jews at the end of Second Temple era. That's the story over here. Think about it for a minute. If we go and sleep in someone's home or in a hotel or whatnot back then, and throughout the night, God forbid, somebody passes away. When we wake up in the morning, we are going to be considered what's called Tmeh Met. Tmeh Met is somebody who's impure because they're in the same house as somebody who passed away. And that is one of the most severe kinds of impurity. And it takes a whole week to become pure. That's a problem. Because the whole goal of this whole story is not just to come to Jerusalem, but it is to enter the temple. You cannot enter the temple when you are Tameh, when you're impure. So you will make every effort possible to remain pure, tahor, on your way to Jerusalem, which means you'll sleep out in the open street. Take the sleeping bag that's in this picture over here. Now we have the alarm clock. Early in the morning, the officer would say, let us arise and go to Tzion, into the house of the Lord our God. Kumu v'na'aleh Beit Hashem Tzion. I don't know, in Hebrew it always sounds better, to me at least. And that'll be a little alarm clock that wakes us up. And we are going to start from here, making our way towards Jerusalem. Look, we need to realize this walking together as a group of people, it's uniting. Okay, it's uniting, making ways a group. So first of all, it's uniting. Second of all, another reason is animals. There's a lot of animals back then, fearful animals that you want to deal with, that you're scared that you might need to deal with. So walking with the group, there's a group with weapons to deal with them, is also very helpful. And of course, you're fearful of thieves. And you're making your way a lot of times to Jerusalem with a lot of money. You walk as a group, and of course, that'll give you a lot of power on your way to there. And as we're making our way towards Jerusalem, we'll make it a musical journey, just like when we drive to Jerusalem today, being in a vehicle, being in a bus, you'll have music. Same thing back then, just as you're walking on foot, on your donkey or whatnot. And as Masechet Bikurim, the Mishnah will continue to tell us, they'll describe an ox would go in front of them, his horns bedecked with gold, and with an olive crown on its head. The flutes would play before them, and they would draw close to Jerusalem. And as they were getting close to Jerusalem, the Talmud, Tractate Pesachim, will describe what I find to be a somewhat humorous story. And it says like this, you know, when you're traveling a lot of times with family, and at a certain point your kids are just driving you crazy, and you're just like, go do something. That's what happened basically over here. It's no different 2,000 years ago. And it says like this, in the case of one who says, as they're making their way to the temple, in the case of one who says to his children, I am slaughtering the Paschal lamb on behalf of whomever of you goes up first to Jerusalem. The kids were driving him nuts. He says, go, run up to Jerusalem, whoever gets there first. I'm slaughtering the Paschal lamb on your behalf. There was an incident such as this, and the daughters preceded the sons. So there's basically a race, the boys against the girls, you know what it's like. And it turned out that the daughters demonstrated that they were enthusiastic, whereas the sons demonstrated that they were lazy. So a little bit of humor and bringing to life also things that we deal with today when we're traveling as a family. It's just like, just get out of my hairs, please, on their way to Jerusalem. And if we go back to our map for a minute, here we're arriving back in Jerusalem, and if we started by Shiloh, and then we visited Tel Dan and Beit El Zehu, we are now arriving in Yerushalayim. And if we are arriving in Yerushalayim, I want to welcome you with a short video from one of the most beautiful viewpoints that we like doing introductions to Yerushalayim, and that is from today's Haz Promenade. So just imagine we're 2,000 years ago, arriving in Jerusalem, at whatever point, a beautiful viewpoint, be it the Haz Promenade, be it Mount Scopus, be it the Mount of Olives, and here's a welcome as we're arriving to Yerushalayim. Welcome to Ami Israel Guide, welcome to Israel, and welcome to Yerushalayim. There are a few events in life that we love to commemorate. Bat mitzvah, getting your degree from university, when you get married, and also definitely when we come to Israel and when we come to Yerushalayim. And especially special to do that when we're standing from over here at the Haz Promenade, overlooking this beautiful view and overview of Yerushalayim. In order to commemorate this special moment, we are together going to say the Shechianu and Hagefen, and you are more than welcome to join me from home. The Shechianu on the wine goes Baruch Ata Hashem, Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, Shechianu v'Kimanu v'Higianu Lazman Hazeh. Baruch Ata Adonai, Eloheinu Melech HaOlam, Borei Pri Hagafen. L'chaim. You gotta love the clink between the glass and the smartphone, as my wife was recording. Look, we are, let me just put the pointer back. You know, let's leave it for a minute on red. Okay, I want to show something, then I'll put it onto blue. That we've arrived to Jerusalem. Now, let's first of all take a look and understand a little bit at what Jerusalem looks like 2,000 years ago. What is the city that we're arriving to at the end of Second Temple era? So please realize this is a city 2,000 years ago, not a picture of today's old city of Jerusalem. Top of the picture here is north, bottom is south, the left is going to be west, and the right side over here is going to be to the east. Of course, the reason of our arrival is the Temple Mount over here, and the second temple that's on top of it. We can see the area of the lower city of Jerusalem. It's called the lower city because topographically, it's lower down. It's in a valley. It's today's city of David, or David, if you visited there before. If not, COVID is over, or when the Israeli government allows you to enter the country, please come visit. I'll be happy to take you around. If you live in Israel, come on over to the city of David. Great place to visit. The upper part, that's the lower city. The upper city is what we know today's area of Mount Zion and the Jewish quarter. That's this area over here. We can see the walls surrounding ancient Jerusalem from back then. Not going to get into the history of each one, whole different topic. But we can see the external wall. It's called the first wall that's over here that's running around. We can see the second wall that's over here. And honestly, unless we're arriving in like the last couple of years before the second temple is destroyed, this third wall didn't exist, not until the very, very end. Where we're going to be coming from? It depends which direction we're coming from. But you know what? Let's choose this valley on the eastern side over here. We're going to come through the Kiron Valley, and in a minute, we'll actually enter the Kiron Valley and see what's unique about it. And let's say we're coming from the Kiron Valley. We're walking through this valley over here, and either if it's from there, or if it's from one of the other directions, there's chances that we'll enter from the bottom area over here, from the southern end, from this area of the city of David. We'll enter here. We'll enter this Pool of Shiloach pool that we're going to visit later. We'll walk up these steps that we're also going to visit later. Eventually, we'll enter the temple. But unless we enter the temple directly, or we, first of all, go to where we're going to be hosted, we'll come up to this area over here of the upper city or anywhere else. And it's in these places over here that we're going to be hosted before getting organized and going to the temple itself. But we have a while before we enter the temple. And I want to introduce you to an area that's very close to the area of the old city. And for whatever reasons, it's off the beaten track. We don't get to there very often. In order to do that, I need to change my pointer because it's a video that I want to stop a lot of times, so bear with me. Here we go. And let's take a look at this video over here. We are now looking into what's known as the Kiron Valley. All the graves in the back are Har HaZeitim, the Mount of Olives. And what we're going to see over here are three monumental tombs dating back to, in the Second Temple era, 2,000 years ago, 1st century before the Common Era, 1st century of the Common Era. And this route, the Kiron Valley over here, that the video in a minute is going to take a very slow turn from north to south, was apparently one of the main travel routes where Olei Regel, pilgrims, made their way through. And because of that, these monumental tombs were built over here. This is going to be a conversation, a dialogue between these tombs and the Olei Regel. Let's take a look. So now we're looking at Zechariah's tomb, okay? And as the camera swerves to the right, to the south, we can see the tomb of the Chezir family, and on the right, the tomb of Zechariah. A few words about the tombs, and then more about the main topic that we're talking about, the Olei Regel, the pilgrims. 3 monumental tombs in the Second Temple era. We don't know who was buried over there. The names aren't connected to who was really buried over there. We have what's called, over here on the left side, the tomb of Avshalom, and we have over here the tomb of the Chezir family. Here specifically, I apologize, we do know who was buried because it says over there that the Chezir family was buried, and they have names from the Chezir family. Who is this family? The Chezir family is mentioned in Chronicles 2 and Divrei Yamim Bet, is one of the 24 Mishmarot Kehuna, 24 priestly families that were in the land of Israel. Is this the same Chezir family years later? Could be, possibly. But that's what it says over there. And over here on the right side, we have what's called the Tomb of Zechariah. Nothing to do with Zechariah. But the idea is these 3 tombs were etched into the bedrock of the Mount of Olives. And on them they have beautiful Greek and Roman era motifs that also remind us of some of the architecture that we have in the Second Temple, itself. Now, these tombs, because they're so, even though we don't know exactly who they necessarily belong to, or at least 2 out of the 3, we don't know exactly who they belong to, they obviously belonged to very wealthy families. This was the creme de la creme of Israeli society, or at least on a financial level, during the end of Second Temple era. And they want to show their wealth. They want to show their power. They want to show the influence that they have. And they want to make sure that anybody who comes and visits Jerusalem sees them and knows who they are. That's this dialogue that's going on over here between whoever was buried over here, the families that were buried in these monumental tombs over here in the Kiron Valley, and the Olei Regel, the pilgrims that are making their way from north to south in the Kiron Valley over here. In addition to that, the motifs, as I mentioned a moment ago, that are on these monumental tombs, they reminded people, they were the same motifs as architectural motifs that were also in the temple. And this will come to start prepare you and remind you, yes, you are coming to the temple, but you're seeing us a little bit before. And let's walk a little bit with these Olei Regel, with these pilgrims, with this view over here of the Kiron Valley, and we're going to make our way through, and from here, if we'd continue walking, we would eventually make our way to the bottom of the city of David, as I showed you before in the map. But Zeo, let's now enter into the Jewish quarter, and we're now entering what's called the Herodian Quarter. If we today visit the Jewish quarter, there's a massive structure called the Shivat HaKotel, and you go underneath it, paid entrance, and we go inside and we see beautiful second era homes. And it again belonged to the financial elite of the Jewish population living then in Jerusalem. Kohanim, priests, not necessarily just Kohanim. And if we were lucky, we would come and we'd knock on the door of these homes over here, and if there was still a little bit of room, they'd let us in. And just for you to understand, in this picture over here, and let me go back to my previous pointer, here we go. This isn't even the main floor. This is the bottom floor, okay? This is the basement area where we can see this beautiful mosaic. We can see a bathtub. Back then, not everybody had bathtubs. You have to be quite wealthy to have your own personal bathtub and your own personal ritual bath, your own personal mikveh over here, and your own personal cellar maybe with wine vats over here. But that's a little bit more, a different time. We can maybe talk about what the Jewish society looked like in Jerusalem in the end of Second Temple era. But we're entering this home over here, and you might be saying, wow, these homes must have been rented out to quite wealthy people because it's expensive to stay over there for the week of whenever we're visiting. And the answer is no. During Sukkot, Pesach and Shavuot, everything belonged to everybody. It was part of this feeling of unity of all the Jewish people, which is why, and I apologize, this is in Hebrew, I'll of course translate it in a minute, which is why you needed to rent it out for free or give out your home for free. So you'd say, okay, maybe the owner of the house would say, I'll give out my house for free, but you got to pay for a bed. Nope, also the beds are for free. Okay, I'll give out the beds for free, but you still got to pay for your sheets. Everything is free. As it says in Tosefta Maser Sheni, En maskirin batim b'Yerushalayim mipnei shen shel shvatim. You cannot rent out the house in Jerusalem because they belong to everybody during Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. The rest of the year you probably can rent them out. Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok omer, af lo amitot. Also the beds you don't rent out. You don't rent out anything. But at the end of the day, you do want to give something, some kind of gratitude to your hosts for hosting you. So, orot shel kolchim ba'alei ushpizin ba'in v'notnin otan bezroa. The skins of the animals that were sacrificed, that the host, whoever the guests would give to the hosts as gratitude. So we've arrived at people's homes, and what will happen if we'll arrive at the homes and everything is full? I mean, we get that feeling a little bit. Try booking a hotel room, not when there's COVID, but try booking a hotel room in Jerusalem a few days before the Pesach, Shavuot, or Sukkot. If you remembered at the last minute that you want to stay in Jerusalem, good luck on that one. Everything is jam-packed. So what happens if you arrive at the very last second? All the houses are occupied. Tents. People put tents all around Jerusalem at that point, and that was what you would sleep in. And it says, as it says in the source of Avot Rabbi Natan, which I'll also translate from Hebrew to English, it says, Me'olam lo amar adam lechavero, lo matzati mita she'eshan alea b'Yerushalayim. A person never said to his friend that I did not find a bed to sleep in Jerusalem. So we're set. We arrived at our dwellings. We put our stuff down. Now it's time to get organized. Where are we going to go to get organized? We are going to go to the area of the Kotel, the western retaining wall of Har HaBayit, of the Temple Mount. No, not to pray or to connect to, like we do today. The Kotel, the western retaining wall of the Temple Mount back then was a shuk. It was a marketplace, okay? And in order to get a bit of more of a feel of that, let's go to Google Street View. And if the picture gets a little woozy, I apologize. I'll try not to move too fast, but let's take a look. First of all, on the left side, we can see the stones of the western retaining wall, the Kotel HaMa'aravi of the Temple Mount. Here's the southern corner of it right over here. The pavement stones that we're standing on right now are the original pavement stones of this marketplace from 2,000 years ago, where our great-grandparents walked back then. If you were standing there, I'd say take your hands and feel the stones, because it's very real. And where are the stores? Let's twist. And as we're twisting, and I'm sorry if it's sort of like not so smooth, but here we go. Here we see the store entrances where we went to get organized, where we went shopping. This is where we where we prepared ourselves regarding whatever we needed to go up to the temple. And now that we got a bit of a feel of being over there, let's go back to the PowerPoint presentation. And it says in the Mishnah in Tractate Bikurim, all the skilled artisans of Jerusalem, here we go, would stand up before them and greet them, saying, here we go, greet the Olei Regel, the pilgrims, and greet them, saying, our brothers, we're united, we're all together, calling them brothers. Our brothers, men of such and such, from wherever you're from, men of such and such a place, we welcome you in peace. All right? Now, as we're coming to over here, and we're looking at these places, and we're walking around, and we're getting organized to go up to the temple. And by the way, there were also stores on the right side of the screen over here. We actually, on the right side of the marketplace, we actually see their destruction. Today they were destroyed when the Romans destroyed the Second Temple. When the Romans knocked down the stones from the top rows of the western wall, they came tumbling down into the marketplace. They destroyed these stores over here, and they broke the stones of the marketplace over here. But the stores were on both sides. As we're looking around, we may be seeing the masses, and we can ask the question, how many people came to over here during the three holidays, the three regalim? So, first of all, let's jump now again to the 21st century. We'll go back to 2,000 years ago, to the time of the first century in a moment. Today, the masses do come up to Yerushalayim, to the old city, to the Kotel during Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. And every year, there is one day of Chol HaMoed on Pesach and one day of Chol HaMoed Sukkot, where we have a wonderful event of Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing, where hundreds of Kohanim will gather together and they will give the Birkat Kohanim, they'll give the priestly blessing. It's all together, it's one way prayer at the Kotel, and the Kotel Plaza is packed to the top with roughly 50,000 people. Yeah, I know this year they're doing it, they're splitting up to 2 days because of COVID. But even as someone I was at the Kotel a lot of times recently giving Slichot tours today and seeing people coming to the Kotel, even if it's not the same numbers as on regular years, it's so wonderful to see the Kotel filling up again after all these places were empty for way too long. But let's leave today and let's go back again to 2,000 years ago. And the Talmud will try to give us an answer to say how many people came to visit. And let's read what it says. It says like this. It talks about kidneys, and from kidneys we try to understand how many visitors were there. The high priest, the Kohen HaGadol, took a kidney from each one, as the kidneys are burned on the altar, and 600,000 pairs of kidneys were found there. That's how many kidneys there is. I'm not trying to gross you out. I'm just trying for us to understand the numbers according to Chazal, according to our sages. And there was not a single Paschal lamb that did not have more than 10 people registered for it. Okay, they call that Passover the Passover of the crowded. You do all the math of what I said. 600 is all these hundreds of thousands of kidneys. You have 2 per animal, times each one by 10, and you are going to get to 12 million people according to the Talmud. That's a lot of people visiting Jerusalem. Today in Jerusalem, you have a little under 1 million people living, and prior to COVID, the peak years of tourism, we had over 4 million visitors from abroad. I think throughout the entire year, you had about 10 million visitors at the Kotel, roughly, something like that. We don't know exactly how many, but that's throughout the entire year. 12 million people at once. That's a bit of a lot. Let's read another description regarding the visitors, and that's, again, Hebrew. I'll translate from Eicha Rabbah, and it's talking about somebody mourning over the destruction of Jerusalem, the temple, and it says, Ele ezkira, this is what I remember. Leshavar haiti ole b'shirot u'vizmirot. I used to go up with singing to the temple. Hamoniyot, hamoniyot, kama de'at amar hamon chogeg. Tons and tons of people would come. Tons and tons of people would celebrate. Was it 12 million? I don't know. But there was a tremendous amount of people. And today the academic world will ask, so how many people does it make sense that visited Jerusalem at the time? And the answer is maybe roughly 100,000 people to fit in to the area of Jerusalem and coming up to the temple during the holidays. That is roughly the amount of people that lived in Jerusalem at the end of Second Temple era. And when you say to me 100,000 people, I try to visualize it. It's a little hard to visualize. So I went back to one of the things I enjoy doing most, and that is American sports. Whoever knows me very well my love to American sports. And I looked up on Google, what is the biggest stadium in the United States today? And the answer is the football stadium of Michigan University that can fit 107,000 people. So looking at this picture over here is roughly the amount of people maybe that made their way to Jerusalem during the Shloshet HaRegalim during peak years. And with so many people, the question is, how do you manage with all the water? Which just talking about it makes me thirsty. There you go. So I'm just going to take a drink. How do you bring water for the masses? And you might say, if you visited the city of David, well, we had the Gihon spring. You might have walked in Hezekiah's tunnel before. True, that is a water source, not for 100,000 people. There are a few other water sources in Jerusalem, but not enough for 100,000 people. So what happens is already a little during the time of the Maccabees from the Hanukkah story about 2,100 years ago, they create what's called the Lower Aqueduct. It's basically a water source which is as the crow flies in a straight line, 10 kilometers, 6 miles south of Jerusalem in the area of what's today known as Gush Etzion. Brechot Shlomo, Solomon's pools, that's this picture over here in the middle. It's at the southern end of this picture over here. And what happens is during that era, they created an aqueduct that zigged and zagged because, as you can see in the picture in the middle over here, there's a lot of mountains around Jerusalem. Jerusalem is surrounded by hills, as it says in the book of Psalms, and if you know Jerusalem a bit, you definitely feel it. you need to zig and zag and twist and turn, and that's the Lower Aqueduct that will make its way around the mountains over here and even through a tunnel at a certain point when we're entering the southern neighborhood of Jerusalem, Amon and Atziv, a 400-meter, 1,300-foot-long tunnel, until eventually the water arrives in the Temple Mount. If as the crow flies, it's a 10-kilometer, 6-mile line, and because of the zigging and the zagging, the entire Lower Aqueduct's distance was 21 kilometers, 12 miles, a half marathon. And the water will flow into Jerusalem, directly into the temple. And with that, if we have arrived at Jerusalem, we've gotten organized, the water's flowing to here, I think it's time to start making our way to the Beit HaMikdash, to the temple itself. At the bottom of the city of David today, okay, of course, here's the second temple on top, but at the bottom of the city of David today, we have what's called Brechat HaShiloach, the Shiloach pool. Its size in meters is 60 by 55 meters, times that by 3.3, and we have the number in feet. We're going to arrive to over there, and by this area of the pool, we have a little promenade to walk around. And after we enter in this pool, and we're going to get a closer picture of what we see today of that pool, before we go to that picture, what we're going to do is, let me show you what will happen when we leave the pool, because we're also going to be heading up from that pool towards the temple. In ancient times, we'd start walking up steps. Now, these steps will eventually come up to the temple. In the bottom area of the steps over here, the width of the steps is 30 meters, 100 feet. That's huge. And as we're making our way up the steps, of course, we can realize that it gets more and more narrow as we're making our way through. And if you're hungry along the way, in the middle of the way up, there's a forum where you can stop and get organized with food and drink and whatnot as you're making your way to the temple. And now what we're going to do in a minute, we're going to jump forward and take a look at what we can see today of Brechat HaShiloach, of the Shiloach pool. And after spending a little bit of time over there, we're going to walk up these steps, or more in the drainage system that is underneath these steps over here. And let's jump in and take a look. When walking through the city of David today, we can see the original 2,000-year-old steps from the pool. The pool is on the bottom, right over here. It hasn't all been dug out yet, but this edge over here was dug out. And after being in the pool, these are the steps that we would walk up, and in a minute, we'll see a video from underneath, from the drainage system. We can see something interesting. The steps over here are narrow and wide, 30 centimeters, 90 centimeters, 30 centimeters, 90 centimeters. Why such a weird set of steps? I mean, I can't imagine that you've ever walked on steps like that before. Why would they do something like that? Because we're going to somewhere holy. Okay, this is holy architecture, or if you wanna call it that. It's created in a way to physically stop you from running up the steps. You have to actually walk somewhat slowly and pay attention to your steps as you are making your way up to such a holy and important place. And from what age would you go up to the Beit HaMikdash, to the temple? And Masechet Tractate Chagigan, the Mishnah, basically says anybody who's a minor, all right, does not need to go up to the temple. Now, not a minor, meaning you're under 21 and can't buy a drink in the United States, but rather the interpretation of minor over here is a little different. Who is the minor? Whoever is unable to ride on his father's shoulders and go up to Jerusalem, to the Temple Mount, according to Beit Shammai. If you are really a baby, you can't even go on your parents' shoulders yet, then you're a minor and you don't have a mitzvah, a commandment to visit the temple. Beit Hillel are always more lenient, but Beit Hillel will say whoever, should have done this in different colors, whoever is unable to hold his father's hand and go up from Jerusalem to the Temple Mount. Beit Hillel says, no. If you need to be able to hold your parents' hand in order to have the mitzvah, the commandment, to go up to the temple. And I will say, without further ado, come join me as we walk through the drainage system underneath the steps that we saw before, towards the area of the Temple Mount. Hey, welcome to Ami Israel Guide here in ancient Jerusalem's old drainage system. It talks in the Jewish sources about 18,000 workers keeping Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, clean during the time of the temple for all the pilgrims that will come to over here to visit Jerusalem and the temple. And yes, it also means where I'm walking right now inside of this drainage system. No, not sewage. That would not come into here. We're talking about rain. It'll rain in Yerushalayim, a tremendous amount. Where's the rain going to go to? Well, when we walk today in the streets, and anywhere in the world, we'll see the drainages that are underneath us, the grates that lead to the drainage system underneath. We're now inside the original drainage system dating back to 2,000 years ago. And I'll just give a quick hello. Hey, how you doing? Nice to see you. And now we're going to go back to the drainage system over here. And I'd love to bring you to here. Really cool also temperature-wise with the heat outside. Nice to walk down here. See you here soon. And when finishing to walk up the area of the drainage system, or in regular times, we'll walk up the steps, of course, in ancient times. But if we walk up the drainage system today, we'll end up finding ourselves coming out in the area of the southern excavations. Before I show you this video, let's flip for a minute. I'm trying to think the best way to do it. Let's not go to this mikveh yet. We're going to come out over here, okay? And we're going to we've finished coming up the steps. And when we're done walking up the steps 2,000 years ago, we're going to come up by the area of the southern wall of the Temple Mount. And here we can see the last few steps that we're going to walk up before we enter the entrances on the southern wall over here that will lead us into the Temple Mount. Pay attention again, please, still. The wide step, narrow step, okay? Wide step, narrow step. Some of the steps over here are original. Some of them are over here are recreated. Now, as we're on these steps, but before we enter into the temple, and we're going to enter the temple from doors that are on this side over here, on the right side, or on the eastern side of the wall over here, there is one more thing that we want to do. And that is go one more time into a mikvah, into a ritual bath. So join me as we go into this ritual bath over here. It's in the Davidson Center, the southern excavation. And as we make our way inside, you know what I want to do is let me go back for a second because I want to I want to change the pointer so I can stop it in the middle. Here we go. We're taking a look at this mikvah over here. And as we're looking into it, take a look. We're about to head inside. Here's the thing. We're making our way down the steps that are on the right side. There's a barrier in the middle, okay, that I mentioned before. And after we're done making our way down the steps and entering into the mikvah, we cover ourselves in water, and then we come out from the other side of the mikvah. Now you need the minimum amount of water that is needed inside is what's called 40 se'ah. That's enough water to cover your body. The water that flows inside needs to come in naturally. You can't have somebody pour it inside. It needs to be what's called in Hebrew mayim lo she'uvim, water that naturally made its way inside. It needs to be carved into the bedrock of the mountain over here. So let's walk down. We're going to make our way through. On the right side of the mechitzas, we're making our way down. The right side of the divider is for people who are basically still making their way inside. Now, when we come out, we're going to come out from the other side, the left side. That is the side for anybody who's exiting. The mechitza, the barrier in the middle, is basically to make sure that you don't by accident touch one another. Because if you're pure coming out from the other side and you accidentally touch someone who's impure, you got to go back inside again. We're looking at the plaster over here inside the mikveh, inside the ritual bath that is helping to hold the water inside and make sure it doesn't seep into the bedrock that's all around. And after going into the water over here inside the mikveh, and I'm sorry if it's a little woozy over here just from my smartphone. I took this video myself, very amateur professionally in that respect. We're now pure, and we're walking out the other side of the barrier, pure, out the steps, and we're ready to go up to the temple. And I'll ask a question. Question is like this, and let's go back just to the beginning over here, and let's look at the mikveh. Why do you need a mikveh next to the Temple Mount? And I'll explain my question. If you're considered impure, okay, for whatever reason, and you need to go to mikveh, you'll only be considered, after going to mikveh, you'll only be considered already pure at the end of the day, or the following day, it depends on whatever condition you're in. If you're standing in a mikveh next to the Temple Mount, you're ready to go into the Temple Mount, all right? You're not going to go in and then wait for the evening or the next day, and then come back and go into the Temple Mount. So why were there about a dozen mikvahot, ritual baths, found right next to the Temple Mount, like this one over here? And Professor Eyal Regev from Bar Ilan University, he basically says, he uses the word mahadrin. Okay, we know the word mahadrin, extra kosher. People might think that they're pure, tahor, but you want to make sure, without a shred of doubt, that you are truly tahor, that you are truly pure when you are entering into the temple, into Beit HaMikdash, which is why we'll find a dozen mikvot ritual baths right next to the temple. People would go in right as they're about to enter inside. And so we're back to the steps now, as we're now truly ready to enter into the temple. A song of ascents from the book of Psalms, a song of ascents of David. I rejoiced when they said to me, we are going to the house of the Lord. Our feet stood inside your gates, O Jerusalem. Look, we'd come up the steps and we'd enter. We can see what these three entrances today. And this is the area of the entrances that people would enter 2,000 years ago. Originally, it was a square shape, not a rounded shape like we can see over here today. This was already built later by the Muslims. And then within the square shape, of course, it was open. It was not shut, and you would enter inside. You would leave three things outside before entering the temple. You leave your shoes, you leave your staff, and you leave your money, you leave your wallet. Basically saying your shoes and your money are financial, social status. You're leaving that outside because everybody's equal before God. And you leave your staff outside because it can be used as a weapon, and the Temple Mount and the temple are a place of peace. And as we're about to enter inside, we can see the entrance and the exit doors. On the eastern side of the southern wall, what I was showing you before here, the three entrances that people used to enter, bit of a different shape 2,000 years ago than what we see today. And we can see part of what was the double exit doors. Take a look. What I'm pointing to here, let me go back over here to my pointer options. It makes it easier for you to see. The shelf that's sticking out over here on top of the wall, that is the original 2,000-year-old top of the exit from the Second Temple that people used to exit from the Temple Mount. Okay, this over here, this is what they would see when they would exit outside. Of course, later it was shut. Now, everybody would enter from the eastern side and make your way around and exit from the western side of the southern wall. Besides people that were in two conditions. And what does it say in the Mishnah of Tractate Midot? It says like this. The two Chulda gates on the south were used both for entrance and exit. All who entered the Temple Mount entered by the right. Okay, it's on the right side of our screen over here. And went to the right and went out by the left. You twisted east to west and then made your way out the southern side of the Temple Mount. Who did it differently? Who did it the opposite? Who went against the direction that everybody was going? Save for one to whom something had happened, who entered and went round to the left. What does it mean something had happened? So either you're in mourning. If you're in your year of mourning, you enter the opposite direction of everybody, and then anybody who sees you says, they try to mourn you, say words of mourning to try and help make you feel better. The other condition that you would go against the crowd was if you were excommunicated by your community. And then people that would meet you head on would say, we hope that you do tshuva, you return to good ways so that you're accepted back into your community. And we'll enter these entrances over here, and we'll go into an underground passageway that was created by King Herod 2,000 years ago when he expanded the area of the Temple Mount. He also expands it to the south. You go through a tunnel over here, and then you go up steps into the Temple Mount itself. And with that, we will go to Machon Megalim and a wonderful movie that they created, which will bring to life our entrance into the temple.
When they emerged at the Temple Mount Plaza, the pilgrims saw an astonishing sight. The huge plaza, the Stoa, the courts, the ornate gates. At the top of the hill, towering to the heavens, rose the temple building itself. Wide in front and narrow in back, the temple reminded the ancients of a seated lion, his mane facing forward. A grapevine made of sparkling gold leaf curved upward from the entrance to the temple building. Golden adornments shone on the roof as on a royal crown. The construction work was completed in record time. In just a year and a half, the Jews, under Herod's direction, finished building the temple. The residents of Jerusalem looked at their handiwork. Before them rose one of the largest, most magnificent houses of prayer in the entire world. Even Titus, who destroyed the temple, declared it the glory of human creation. Whoever has not seen Herod's building has never seen a beautiful building in their life. Tens of thousands of pilgrims, Jews and non-Jews alike, thronged the new temple to worship the God of Israel. They came from around the world to see the biggest sacred compound ever built. A temple built for an invisible God with no images or idols. Its gates open to everyone. A house of prayer for all nations.
And I very much encourage you to go into YouTube and write Machon Megalim or Megalim Institute, and there are a dozen or so short movies, 7 to 15 minutes long, partially animated and partially with top archaeologists from the area that talk about, usually it's the Second Temple era. Absolutely fascinating. And what I showed you is part of a 15-minute long movie, which I just edited the part of the temple out. So here we can see, we've come to the temple, we're visiting the temple. We're going to enter inside from the southern wall over here. We're going to walk along the eastern side, enter the temple, and after the temple, continue along from the western side and enter out from the other gates over here in the southern wall. And as it says in the book of Tehillim, or the book of Psalms, I extol you, O Lord, for you have lifted me up, and now let my enemies rejoice over me. Whoever was visiting the temple is thanking the Lord for having a successful trip to the temple and that they weren't stopped and attacked by enemies along the way. Sing to him and praise his holy name. Take note of its ramparts. Go through its citadels, that you may recount it to a future age. For God, he is our God forever. He will lead us evermore. I'll just go back again. Take note of its ramparts. Go to its citadels, that you may recount it for future age. All right, this is a memory. We're recounting it today. We are today the future age. We are recounting this history, this memory that unites us in such a wonderful way and still brings us back very strong as Olei Regel pilgrims also today in this case, on Sukkot, both with the past connecting us to the present of Aliyah LaRegel and Sukkot. And with that I'll say thank you very much. Toda Rabba. We'll go to questions, but as usual, as I always say, you're welcome to email me with whatever questions, comments, remarks we didn't get to. Tamar, over to you. I don't hear. Just a second.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Now I hear you, yeah.
Great. Okay, we have all kind of comments, and let's see which one of these are our questions. First of all, a question that many people ask, we tape the sessions and they will be up hopefully after Sukkot, because the Chagim, it's taking more time. So you can look for on the VOD of Bet Avichai or on our website. Some people ask whether women were also part of the pilgrimage, or when you talk about numbers and groups, is it counting only men?
You know what? No one has ever asked me that question before.
So there's a few asked this question actually here.
You know what? I don't want to give a question off the top and give the answer at the top. I don't just say yes, absolutely, of course. Please email me, and I will look into the sources and give a more educated answer to your question. Okay, that's a legitimate question. I should be able to give a good answer. Email me, and I will give you a good answer.
Okay. Question came from Patrick. Patrick, how did the water from the aqueduct flow uphill to the temple?
Excellent question. It didn't flow uphill to the temple. What happened is, let's go back to the picture of the Lower Aqueduct. Here we go. I'm showing it to you again. It looks like here. Let's do also pointer option. It looks like it's uphill, but it's not. It's just because the bottom of the screen is south and it headed north. But over here, there is Solomon's pools in meters is 765 meters above sea level. Times it by 3 for feet. The Temple Mount is 735 meters above sea level, so it's going down. What they needed, it's going down. So what's what I'm looking for? Anyway, the gradient is leading down. But in order to make sure that it's always leading down, and you can't go straight up and down mountains, that's why it's so twisty and turny, because they kept going around mountains and remaining in valleys that were making their way down in order to get to the Temple Mount and remain constantly going down in a gradient, making its way down. And the tunnel that we see on the left side over here was actually cut into the mountain in a southern Jerusalem neighborhood called Armona Netziv today, because it was just, you couldn't go up the mountain, of course, and going around was too much. So when you go into the tunnel, you're still always going down. So from a distance of 10 kilometers, you're basically going from 765 meters above sea level to 735 meters above sea level. I hope that made sense what I said. I hope I explained it appropriately.
Okay. Rosalind wants to know if when both the mourners and the excommunicated went to the left, how did people know if it was mourners or excommunicated?
Good question. Good question. I'm sure they would bump into them, and they talked. They talked. People talk. That's the best answer I can give. Why are you going the other way? Oh, my, whatnot passed away a few months ago. Or why are you going the other wrong way? Oh, you didn't hear about the story that happened to him. He was excommunicated after doing it. I figured something like that.
Did people enter the temple wet, or did they dry and change clothes?
So
after they went mikveh.
I've read a lot of sources about that. I don't think anyone has quite addressed that. But when you come, I'm assuming they somehow dried out. Look, first of all, you go in without clothes. You go into the mikveh without clothes, not into the temple. You go into the mikveh without clothes. When you come out of the mikveh, you put your clothes back on. I'm assuming there's a towel over there. They dried themselves off. I can't imagine them putting their clothes on when they're dripping wet. So their clothes will be dry. They'll wait for them outside the mikveh. They come out of the mikveh. Dry yourself off, you put on your clothes, you enter the temple in a respectable way.
Were the mikvahs connected to the springs?
So in these, you have different kinds of mikvaot, okay? In this case, next to the Temple Mount, what happens is I can understand the question in a few different ways. But there wasn't a spring right next to the mikveh. There were aqueducts that had water flow into the mikveh. It can be either from a spring in the area, or it can be from rainwater, okay, that accumulated and made their way via an aqueduct into the mikveh, into the ritual bath. Every mikveh was a different story.
Okay, and I think this might be our last question. What is the distance from the tomb, between the tombs and the city of David? I'm not sure which tombs.
I'm assuming you're talking about the monumental tombs in the Kiron Valley.
Okay.
They're very close. I'll show you. Let's go back to this picture. I want to show you a better one. Just a second. This picture over here. God, I'm glad you're showing. Thank you very much for showing the picture. Look, let's do the pointer again. The monumental tombs are somewhere over here. So you're walking basically from over here down to the bottom of Ir David. Several hundred meters, a couple thousand feet,
It's only a few minutes, actually.
Yeah, about a 15-minute walk, something like that. 10-minute walk, something like that. It's very close.
Can you explain again where Derech HaKeisar is?
Let me show you on the map. Even though it's not the best map to show it, I would need to zoom in a lot more, and I don't have the ability over here. Derech HaKeisar, let's go back to our pointer option. Derech HaKeisar is about over here. Okay, basically meaning if this is the Beit Shemesh area more or less, if this is the Elav Valley, when you're driving west to east, you're coming up from the area of Beit Shemesh and the Elav Valley on a very windy road that arrives at Gush Etzion. Okay, it's on the windy road that arrives at Gush Etzion, which is south of Jerusalem, and then you drive into Jerusalem. It basically led up to the watershed line, okay, which is south of Jerusalem, which is the main travel route, also known as the way the patriarchs Derech Avot that led into Jerusalem.
Okay, so let's see our last comment here from Alan. He said, the pavement stones that you showed are from Roman construction. Are these stones from previous periods? Have stones from previous periods been discovered?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Jerusalem, it's endless. I mean, maybe the stones that I showed, yeah, I'll answer your question. I'll answer your question. The stones by the area of the southern wall and the steps by the southern wall and the marketplace were built sometime from the time of King Herod, who was a Roman client king, through the 1st century when they were local Roman rulers over here. Okay, they were built during Roman rule over Jerusalem. Earlier on, the Hashmonaim, the Maccabees from the Hanukkah story, who are roughly 100 years before, because it's a period that extends a certain amount of time, they already extended the area of the Temple Mount. They already built a lot of different things in the area. They built some of the walls that I was showing you around Jerusalem. They didn't build up the area of the marketplace that we were looking at before, but they do expand the Temple Mount in the area of Jerusalem. And of course, when you talk about the history of Jerusalem and the city of David, we go back to First Temple era, where there's endless amounts of archaeological findings.
Okay, so I said we're almost done, but I'm gonna, one more. Alessandro says that you mentioned a mikveh that was on the pilgrimage road, and you said that you will explain later. Did you?
Yeah, I did. Basically, I said that I'll explain why there's a mechitza barrier going down the middle. And I'll just repeat again very briefly. Yeah. The reason is because you went down one side to enter, you exited on the other side exit, and you wanted to make sure that someone who's pure or impure don't touch one another, so you have the mechitza, the barrier in the middle.
Okay, Ami, I think we're all ready to make the pilgrimage, either for real or through your tour. Thank you for joining us. Chag Sameach, and we'll be back after Sukkot with other programs, which Boya posted the links to them. So thank you again, and Ami, Chag Sameach to you too. Good evening from Jerusalem.
Chag Sameach, Tamar, and Chag Sameach to all of you.